Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault. Once again, I'm coming to you with another range report. And in today's range report, we're going to be taking a look at a pistol that I think many of you are going to think is a work of art. And the gun we are reviewing today is the Cabot Guns Apocalypse. Now this is a 1911 single stack chambered in .45 ACP, and it's made by one of the top tier gun manufacturers in the United States. And maybe you can tell what makes this gun so beautiful. The slide is made of Damascus steel. Now that slide is not just polished flat, it actually has a very nice texture to it. And you can see that as I show you all of the intricacies that went into the manufacturing. That is an absolutely beautiful firearm. And Cabot did an amazing job with the finish of this gun. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Cabot Guns, they're a company that is based out of Pennsylvania that I believe originally started out in the aerospace industry or something of that nature, and they turned their eyes to manufacturing guns. And they were known for precise machining of very intricate parts, and they wanted to take this speciality that they had and apply it to America's gun, the 1911. And so they prided themselves on making a gun that was like none other. A 1911 that was built so precise that I think originally they claimed the parts were interchangeable without hand fitting. These guns were made to perfection. Now, when it came to these guns, when they hit the marketplace, I actually had a little bit of issue with them. I want to say the company is 10 or 15 years old. And when these guns hit the market, they cost a pretty penny. Now, adjusting for inflation, they had models that were $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 back in 2010. And that, in my opinion, was absolutely obscene. We are talking about a design that at that time was 100 years old. And yes, it is cool. It's one of the best pistols that's ever been made. However, the design, as I mentioned, was a century old. And this would be no different than another company coming out and saying, we're going to release a Ford Model T, but made with the best machining today. You would probably go, well, that car is a piece of history. It's definitely really cool, but it's not worth $200,000 comparatively just because it's made on modern tooling. I could definitely appreciate the engineering that Cabot put into their firearms. However, I didn't appreciate the cost. Not because I was jealous and I really wanted one, but it's because it seemed like this inflated the price of 1911s across the board. All of a sudden, everyone wanted a Cabot Guns. And then the other companies were like, wait, hold up a second. You mean to tell us people will pay $5,000, $6,000, or $7,000 for a 1911? Why in the world are we charging $600, $700, or $800? Let's charge $1,600 or $2,000. And I remember the price of 1911s from pretty much every other company skyrocketed. And I always kind of had a bias against Cabot Guns because of this. And I grew up in this era. I was getting involved in 1911s in this era, and I remember when this happened. And I guess in some ways I never forgave Cabot Guns for that. Now some people might say this is going to taint my review, and I'm going to be a little bit biased, but I'm going to try to take all of those thoughts out of this review and just tell you how this gun shoots. I can tell you, holding it here on the table, this is an absolutely beautiful firearm. But I really felt like I needed to tell you that story before we talk about the things that I like and don't like, and of course get this thing to the range and see how it shoots. But before we do this, as always, I want to make sure I thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this absolutely gorgeous pistol. He's a local fan and subscriber, and his name is D, and he's lent many amazing guns to the channel for me to review. So once again, D, Thank you so much. As always, I want to thank my Patreon supporters because through their monthly donations and support, they help keep the lights on around here, and I couldn't do this without them. And if you guys want to join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month, you get to see all these videos early. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor who always provides the ammunition for these range reports and thus makes them financially feasible for me, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And here we are once again reviewing a top tier 1911. This gun is an absolute work of art from Cabot Guns, and most likely you own a 1911 yourself and you would like a set of artistic wood grips to make your 1911 unique and one of a kind. Well, I have the perfect grip company for you. Brownworks. Brownworks is a custom grip company making a wide variety of grips out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials for a wide variety of firearms. Mark is an artist and he's a craftsman, and the 1911 is one of his specialties. He can apply custom logos, custom engravings, custom textures, finish these grips in a wide variety of colors. He can make his own laminate woods and even apply exotic materials like snakeskin and alligator skin to these grips to make them unique and one of a kind. Anything you could imagine, Mark can make. So I'm going to put a link to his website in the comment section below, as well as a coupon code for 10% off your first order. And I'm going to ask you all to go over there and see everything he has to offer. And make sure to contact Mark and tell him specifically what you're looking to get on your grips, and he can make it for you. Every grip is unique, one of a kind, and made to order. So please go over to his website, please contact Mark, tell him what you're looking for, and when you place that order for those custom grips, please tell him the Texas Gun Vault sent you. Alright, so once again, let's talk about the pistol we have on the table today. An absolutely beautiful work of art from Cabot Guns, the Apocalypse. This is a 1911 pistol chambered in .45. It is single stack, but it has one design change that's different than John Moses Browning's original design. It has something they call the Advantage Extractor. You'll notice on the back, we do not have the place for the internal extractor to be removed. It's a little bit different, and some people say it enhances reliability. So for the most part, this gun is like a standard 1911, but it does have that one modernization to it. We've already talked about how this pistol has a slide made of Damascus steel, and I'm trying to show you as many close-ups of this slide as possible so you can see the craftsmanship and the work of art that this pistol is made of. This is an all-steel firearm. And as I said, it is absolutely beautiful. Now, before we get this gun to the range, as always, I want to talk about the things that I like and don't like, and I always want to start with the positive first. And I think the biggest draw to this firearm is the craftsmanship that went into it. As I mentioned, this thing is an absolute work of art. I love the mechanics of guns. I love learning how guns are made, how they operate. But sometimes you have to take a step back and look at what goes into the gun from a beauty standpoint. And normally, as I said, I care more about the function than anything else. But sometimes something is made so nice, you just have to appreciate it for what it is. You don't have to even shoot this gun to know it's going to be nice, that this is a high quality firearm. And of course, that's the reputation that Cabot has. I really haven't heard anybody say that their guns are a piece of junk. I mean, after all, for the price that they're asking for them, you're expecting a top tier product. And that is what I'm pretty sure everybody gets. You might not like the company, you might not like the designs or aspects of the designs, but you cannot deny that these are functional works of art, and they're like no other 1911 out there. And if you're looking for something special and unique, Cabot Guns is the company to look at. Now, the next thing I absolutely love is kind of in that same vein, and that is going to be the fit and the finish of this gun. I cannot find an imperfection on it, inside or out. And I remember when I was reading about Cabot Guns, when they first started making firearms, they were talking about the hours of polishing that went into these to make sure that before they leave the factory, these guns were perfectly fit and perfectly finished. And I have to say, holding my first 1911 from Cabot Guns, that is definitely the case. This gun literally is finished perfect. It must take hours to make sure it comes off the assembly line like this. I'm also a big fan that they decided to go with some pretty classic controls on a 1911. You got a big old beaver tail, extended safety, you have the skeletonized hammer. I think that is just a classy look for a modern 1911. And of course you'll note this pistol is cut for an optic, and we have a Trijicon SRO on this, but they also put on these really nice, very tall sights. And you can use those through the red dot, of course, if your red dot goes down, and I do like that. Now, I did install this Trijicon SRO for this review. In fact, my friend D let me unbox this on camera, and when you see this gun being shot for the first time, it's actually the first shots through it ever, and that is so cool. That's what I like about this pistol. Now let's talk about a couple things that I don't like. And the first thing, I have to be very honest with you, is kind of frivolous and silly. And it's just an aesthetic choice that bothers me. Every one of the Cabot guns I have ever seen, they try to incorporate a star. And for me, it's always looked silly. I remember the early Cabot guns had cutouts in the skeletonized trigger. But here, they've been a little bit more discreet with it. They put it on the recoil spring guide rod. And for some reason, I just don't like that. I've always thought it looks a little bit goofy. It doesn't change the functionality of this pistol. It's just a personal preference, and I wish they would get rid of that. You'll also notice that this gun has a flat face trigger, and man, I do not like that. Even though when it comes to flat face triggers, I can tolerate them in 1911s better than pretty much any other pistol, because this trigger comes directly back into the frame. It's not on a hinge. Now, before I adjust the camera and talk about the trigger a little bit more, because I actually don't like the trigger in this as compared to other 1911s and 2011s, I want to talk about the weight. This is an all-steel firearm. But I also think this Damascus steel is a little bit heavier than your standard carbon steel. This is a very heavy 1911. And I kind of feel like it gives you a sense that this is a big, strong, hefty gun, but also at the range, I think that's going to translate into a more tiring experience, especially if you go to the range, put 200 or 300 rounds through this. I think that weight's going to kind of drag you down just a little bit. But I don't know what you can really do about that. It's just something that I noticed here on the workbench. But as I mentioned, I don't like this trigger as much as I thought I would, and it has nothing to do with the shape of the trigger. So let me go ahead and adjust this camera. Let's get out the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge, and I'm going to show you what this trigger is all about and what I've discovered. So let's take a closer look at the trigger in this very beautiful Cabot Guns Apocalypse. Of course, we will start by dropping the magazine, ensuring there is no ammunition in it. And we can also look at that beautifully engraved Cabot Guns logo on that magazine. That is a very nice touch. Then we will safety check the firearm, ensure there is no ammunition in it, and it looks like we are clear. Now let me show you the take-up on this trigger pull. And this is what I think is the nicest part of this trigger. This take-up is very short, and it's very smooth. That feels fantastic. We come back to a very definitive wall, and without measuring this yet, I kind of feel like this trigger breaks at about 3 pounds. That feels really good. And let's take a look at that again. Short take up, and it breaks like a glass rod. That feels great. But now let's talk about the reset. And this is going to be the one thing about this trigger I don't like. And I think it has to do with the trigger return spring, or the spring that pushes the trigger forward. I'm going to slowly release my trigger, and once it reaches a certain pressure, I feel like that spring, which is very strong, returns the trigger unexpectedly. So I'm lightly releasing the trigger, and then ooh, it just goes forward really fast, and you're not really sure where it's going to reset. Now, you are right back at that wall. But when it comes to 1911 triggers, I like to ride the reset when I'm shooting them at the range. And I like to sometimes slowly release the trigger and have the trigger come with my finger, but this one kind of seems to stay back until it reaches a certain point in the travel, and then it just shoots forward. There it is. And I know that's probably a very small complaint, but for me that feels a little bit different than many other 1911 triggers I have shot. And so I think that has to do with the spring in here. Now maybe that is a design choice when it comes from Cabot Guns. But for me personally, that feels a little bit weird. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, it just feels different. And I'm curious if any of you have 1911 triggers like that. But now let's actually measure this trigger and see how heavy it is. So let's use the Lyman trigger pull weight gauge. Let's turn it on. Let's make sure we clear the averages. And for our first pull, we have 3 pounds, 6.2 ounces. And that actually, I think, is a little bit heavier than what I was expecting for this trigger. But let's try this again. I'm trying to be as consistent as I possibly can. 3 pounds, 3.9 ounces. Three pounds, 2.1 ounces. 3 pounds, 2.3 ounces. 3 pounds, 1.8 ounces. And finally we have 3 pounds, 5.3 ounces, which gives us an average of 3 pounds, 3.6 ounces. Now, I will tell you, that seems to be heavier than what the trigger pull actually feels like, because I think that take-up is so smooth and so light, it really feels closer to 3 pounds or maybe a little bit less. So that's kind of a deceptive feel, but I like that about the trigger pull. It's just that reset that I don't like. So how is all of this going to translate to the shooting experience at the range? Well, let's find out. As always, I'm going to put the first shots through this at just 7 yards. I'm going to put 2 magazines of 45 ACP through it and just see how it performs. For a gun that is this beautiful, I hope it shoots equally as well. And for the first rounds through this pistol, that's pretty darn good. Some of those rounds were grouped really tightly. I did have a couple that were outside, and I think I know why that is, and it has to do with this trigger reset. When I shoot 1911s, I like to ride the reset, and this trigger resets kind of abruptly, and it kind of threw me off just a little bit. So I will have to take that into consideration as I shoot this pistol more. I also want to talk about the recoil impulse. I noticed when I'm racking the slide that this recoil spring seems to be a lot stronger than a standard 1911 spring. And I think that translates into a different feel when the gun cycles. It's a slower thud than I'm used to with like a Colt 1911. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just different. And obviously that is a design choice, and mechanically they did that for some reason. I don't know how I really feel about it, but as I said, it's just different. Alright, so now let's double the distance on this target. Let's put 2 more magazines through this and see if I can shoot this gun any better. So let's go back to the range. And like the previous group, this one's pretty good too. It's not great, but some of those rounds are grouped really tightly. I can tell this gun is very, very accurate. I'm just gonna have to learn how it shoots. So this is probably more me than it is the firearm. But me getting acclimated to this gun is a little bit of a learning curve. I like to think I have a lot of trigger time on 1911s. I know how they shoot. I know their tendencies, and I know how I shoot them. And this one is just a little bit different. But as I said, hopefully as I put more rounds through this, I'll get used to it. But my gut tells me this gun is very, very accurate. I just got to learn how to shoot it better because it's so different. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is try to take as much of the human element out of the equation as possible. I'm going to set the target out at 25 yards, put 2 more magazines through this, and see what the best group I can get with it is, shooting it from a bench.
We'll shoot that box in.
And for me shooting a 1911, I'm going to take that group all day. I am very happy with how this gun is performing, and I'm getting used to it. Normally at 25 yards with 45 caliber handguns, and especially 1911s, I don't shoot them that well. This really is an inherently accurate gun. You just have what I think is a learning curve because you think you're going to pick this up and go, oh, it's just like my Colt. No, it's not. It's a little bit different. It looks the part, but maybe due to the weight and the spring tensions, it just shoots different. Once again, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. But so far, I'm really liking this gun. It's not the best 1911 I've ever shot, but you can tell that the accuracy is built into this gun, and it has to obviously do with the manufacturing and the tight tolerances. All right, so the next test I want to do is the hollow point test. Now, I don't think Cabot makes this gun necessarily as a competition gun. This is just simply a high-end 1911. Maybe a range gun, or maybe a gun you want to use for home defense. And you want to know, with these tight tolerances, is it going to run hollow points? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So let's go back to the range, put 2 magazines of hollow points through it, and see if we have any issues.
You can't see very well?
No, I can't. But I'm saying, like, as far as trying to dial it in, you need, like, some reactive. But you're right. I mean, if you're shooting something down there, it's taking it back there, making it hit.
Yeah. I don't know what distance I sighted in at. It's 15 yards, so you can see it's a little low. Just right for
Yeah.
how far is it from the street?
It's on 22 feet.
22 feet.
40 feet, yeah.
That's where you need to sight.
And you can always be around like Norfolk, Virginia, like
I'll be right on top of it. Yeah, I was able to a little higher. Oh, that's nice grade. It was actually a little bit lower still.
And as you can see, we really only had one issue, and that was getting that first round from the magazine into the chamber. But once we started to fire the gun, we had no issues, no failures. But I did want to show you the projectile. I have the exact box of ammunition I had at the range for this test. And as you can see, the projectile does have a very large cavity in the front, and the nose is pretty flat. So is it the tighter tolerances of the gun, or maybe the projectile shape that caused this issue? I do not know, but as I said, the gun ran fine and was very accurate with the hollow points, so I really have no issue whatsoever. All right, so the next test I want to do is kind of a 3-in-1 defensive test, and this is honestly is a little bit more fun for me than anything else. Number 1, I want to see, can I shoot the gun fast? Number 2, I want to see if I can drop the magazine, get a fresh one in here, and get the gun back in action. And the third test I want to do is see how point shootable the gun is. I know that as an average gun guy, I want to think if I ever have to pull a gun in self-defense, I'm going to get my sights on target. If I'm using a red dot, I'm going to get that red dot right where I need it and you can see it. But that might not be the case. You might have so much adrenaline flowing through your veins, you just pull the gun, point, and hope it hits the target. And I want to see, can I shoot the gun fast? And is it point shootable? Is it a naturally pointing firearm? It's a 1911, and normally they are. So let's go to the range, let's have some fun with this, and let's see if you had to use it in an emergency like this, how would it fare? And yeah, I can shoot this pistol pretty fast. And this is actually where this weird reset, I think, has an advantage because it pushes that trigger forward. It gets you ready to shoot quicker than other 1911 triggers. So maybe that's what the design is about. I kind of like it in that circumstance. Now, this gun also has an absolutely fantastic mag well, and that makes finding it really easy and getting that fresh mag back in there really quick and easy. I like that. Now let's talk about the group. Well, because this gun has a little bit different recoil, I kind of felt like while all my rounds were on target, they weren't as good as they could have been. Now remember, I'm just point shooting this gun. I'm acting as though I have an intruder coming at me and I have to dump as many rounds as possible as quickly as possible. So I thought that was okay, but I kind of felt like I had a hard time keeping the group tighter than really what it should be. But man, can I shoot this gun fast. So, what are my final thoughts on the Cabot Guns Apocalypse? Honestly, this might be the most beautiful gun I have ever reviewed. I still cannot get over how awesome this gun looks. Handling it, I can tell you the tolerances are very tight. This thing is machined to perfection. It is a very consistent gun, and I'm very impressed with that. And I can see if you buy this gun and train with it and shoot it often, you will get really good with it because it has a lot of inherent accuracy. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. The trigger is a little bit different. I kind of wish the trigger face was curved instead of flat, but I understand people like the flat triggers nowadays. And the other thing I don't like is that it is a little bit on the heavy side, but that's easily overcome. So overall, this has been an absolutely amazing experience with a great firearm. Is it the best 1911 I've ever shot? I don't think so. Is it in the top 3? Absolutely. Is it the most beautiful 1911 I've ever shot? Yeah, it is, hands down. And I really think that's why people are going to gravitate towards this brand. So on my star system, what would I give the Cabot Guns Apocalypse? It's a great gun. I can tell the accuracy is there, and you can't beat the aesthetics. So I feel like I can give this 4.75 stars out of 5. Almost a perfect review. If it wasn't for that trigger reset, and maybe if I personally shot the gun just a smidge better, it would be absolutely perfect. But if I had the chance to put thousands of rounds through it, I think I could get it there. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Have you ever owned or shot a Cabot Guns 1911? And how do you think it compared to other 1911 manufacturers? I would love to know. So, as always, thanks for watching. Let's put 2 more magazines through it and see what happens at a further distance. Oh, damn it. The other thing that seems to be a little bit different about this gun that is